With the new Mariners season on the horizon, there is plenty of speculation about the team and their chances for success this season. We had a chance to sit down with team owner John Stanton, as well as president of baseball operations Jerry Dipoto, to dig deep into various topics. Mariners fans did not like the way the offseason started, with things that were said and some of the moves that were made. But I walked away from these interviews with a much better understanding of what this organization is trying to do now and in the future. John Stanton talked about the criticism his team has faced right out of the gate.
The offseason began painfully. Our goal was to make the playoffs last year, and we missed the playoffs. We missed it by a little bit, but in a lot of ways it doesn't matter if you miss it by a little or a lot. We missed the playoffs, and along with Jerry and Justin and our whole team, I was very disappointed.
How about as far as throughout the offseason, there's been criticism from the media, you could hear it through the fans and on social media and things like that, but as an ownership group, and you hear the criticisms of the Mariners and maybe the owners themselves, how tough is that for you to deal with?
I guess I don't view the criticism of me as being particularly tough, right? I mean, I don't, that's not my concern. I want the team to succeed. I want the Mariners to win on the field. I want the fans to enjoy the experience of coming to games. I want them to have the excitement that we all had in 22 from the, going to the playoffs. And this town was alive. It was a baseball town. And that's what I want to have happen every year.
Well, I mean, last year, you guys take it to the final couple of days of the season. And I think people lose sight of that, how close you guys were to making the playoffs for a second straight year.
Well, really, it's 3 years in a row we were close.
Right.
I mean, the 21 season, we won 90 games, and I think it was the seventh inning of the last game of the season that we were eliminated, and that was when Scott went out and got Seager and got his standing ovation at the end of his season and career. And from my point of view, I don't want to lose that feeling. Every year, our goal is to be a competitive team, to have a team that's in a good position to be in the playoffs. And if you make it into the playoffs, you got a good chance of winning the World Series.
One of the criticisms that we've heard over the last couple of months is trimming of the payroll for this franchise. What went into the decision to maybe help fans understand a little bit more about why you trimmed the payroll?
Well, we didn't trim the payroll. Right now, the payroll is slightly above what it was last year. That's what we expect the payroll to be. From my point of view, I think that the fans understandably reacted to some decisions that we made early on in the season. And to be clear, the decisions are Jerry and Justin's decisions. I approve them in most cases, but our baseball guys make those decisions. The decisions we made was we had some players who had contracts for the 24 season that weren't going to be able to contribute to the team on the field. I think Robbie Ray walks on water. I'm a huge fan of Evan White. I think those are great people, and I love to have them associated with the team. But Robbie had Tommy John surgery, and the only thing I know for sure about Tommy John surgery is the recovery takes longer than you think it's going to. And we knew that the Tommy John surgery was probably going to keep Robbie out at least through July, maybe August. And so we're now in a position where we've got, frankly, $23 million associated with a guy who isn't going to be able to contribute 4 of the 6 months of the season. Evan similarly. And so we made a decision to take players off of the roster and have the payroll in effect replaced by guys like Garver and Polanco. And we're going to have, with a higher, call it the same payroll, it's a slightly higher payroll, as I said, but with a similar payroll, we're going to have more productivity, and all of the analytics that both we and the third parties do would suggest that we're a better team in 24 than we were in 23.
Well, I think a lot of the fans and us in the media, they look at the moves you made in the offseason and say, you know what, that's a pretty good move right there. That's a pretty good move right there, but why'd they do this? So it's kind of helpful for them to hear from you kind of the explanation of just what was going on in your minds.
Well, we all read the newspaper. We all listen to your reports, Paul. But the fact is that when you look at one trade, you're kind of taking a snapshot of a movie. right? You're looking at one frame of a movie and you're saying, wow, why did they do that? And the answer is you've got to look at the entire arc of our offseason and look bluntly at what the team looked like at the last day, October 1st of 23, versus what's it going to look like, what's it likely to look like on March 28th when we open against the Red Sox this season. And I would tell you, I think it's unambiguous that this is a better team. And I think it's a better team because we were able to redeploy some of those dollars from contracts from players that weren't going to be able to contribute to hire, acquire, trade for players that are going to be able to contribute.
Let's talk TV deal. What can you tell us about it and the fact that, was there a chance for you to be, as an ownership group, to be a little bit more proactive and maybe anticipate what was going to happen with this thing, and where are we with that?
Well, I would say that the Mariners have been as proactive as is possible given the circumstances. The things we know. There's 100% certainty that somebody today is going to disconnect their cable TV service, disconnect their satellite service, because that was true for each day of the last 10 years. The number of customers on Root Sports when we bought control in 2014 was 3.3 million. The number of customers on Root Sports today is about 1.2 million. And whether you are a team like Pittsburgh, Houston, Denver, that had a partnership with Warner Brothers Discovery, that had been AT&T, that had been Liberty, that had been Fox, or you were with the Sinclair Diamond Bally's entity, there are 14 teams there, or whether you were like the Yankees or the Red Sox that had your own network, everyone is affected by that same phenomenon. Cable cutting is real. Paul, it's not you and I that are cutting our cable, it's our kids. The next generation, in many cases, they're not cutting cable, they never had cable. And so the dynamic is that we know that our fans are looking for new ways to consume Mariner games, to be able to watch Mariner games on video. And we're working very hard to assure that. We're going to continue to give people the opportunity to watch Root on cable. We call it linear broadcasting. But we're also looking for digital alternatives for them. We're working closely with Major League Baseball. We're working closely with our existing partners such as Comcast to ensure that our customers, our fans can watch. But we've got to deal with the reality that consuming television, as we grew up calling it, is different.
Oh, I think it's true across the board, not only in sporting events, but even in local news. I mean, it's one of those things where, so there's a lot of options for you in the future. It's just a question of which way you go or how many ways you can go to get the Mariner product out there.
I think that you said it right. It's not just which way we go, it's how many different ways we can give people the opportunity to consume. I have a son in Washington, D.C., who is able to consume our games. He works an early shift at his job. He gets up every morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. He has a cup of coffee, and he watches a condensed version of our game. We have friends that have kids in different parts of the country, different parts of the world, and they find ways to consume the baseball programming in general, but Mariners programming specifically. I want people who are here in the Seattle area, in our viewing area, to consume the linear programming if they have linear TV, or to have a digital alternative. And we're working through that. We don't have all the digital alternatives available today because we have existing or pre-existing agreements with companies like Comcast, like DirecTV, that limit our ability to be able to offer digital alternatives, and we're working through that.
Yeah, it's an involved process for sure. Let's talk about you as an owner, John. Some owners in pro sports are in it for profits, and some are in it to win at all costs. How tough is it to find that balance?
Well, I would say maybe I'm in a third category. I'm in it to win over a long period of time. I grew up here. I grew up in Woodridge, and I went to Newport High School in Bellevue. I've lived here virtually my entire life. I was a Pilots fan in 1969, and I've been a Mariners fan since we started playing almost 45 years ago. From my point of view, the disappointing results that we had on the field for many years, for decades, is unacceptable. We need to have a team that's competitive every year. And as I look at our team this year, I look at a team that's so young and so talented, all of whom will be back next year in 25. We're in a position where we've got a runway of the young players, the Cal Raleighs, the best pitching staff in baseball, the J.P. Crawfords, to have guys that have the ability to win this year, next year, and the following year. And now a farm system that Jerry and Justin and the team in baseball operations have built that includes some of the finest young players in baseball, so that for the years in 27 and 28 and 29, we're going to be in a position where we'll have a competitive team every year. I don't want to push all in and have a chance to win the World Series, but have the cost of that chance be a team that's going to be lousy for the next 3 or 4 years. And we see that in baseball all the time. Teams that have pushed in. You look at what a great team that the Kansas City Royals had that went to the World Series a few years ago and hasn't had a winning year since then. Teams that have the ability to play good baseball year in and year out, make the playoffs consistently, and win the World Series. That's what I want to do.
Well, I mean, you brought it up earlier. The last 3 years have been solid. You're right there, even though you only made the playoffs once at that point. You bring up Cal Raleigh. He let his emotions get the best of him at the end of last year. Is there a message being sent to your players? Like, how do you think, what's their perceived message of ownership, do you think, at this point?
Well, I guess I would start. I talked to Cal one-on-one right after the comments he made to the press. I told him I understand how he feels, and I feel the same way. I want this team to win. Cal is an intensely competitive player. You don't want to play ping pong against Cal, or you don't want to play any sports. You don't want to play tiddlywinks against J.P. Crawford. We've got guys that love this team. George Kirby is an incredibly intensely competitive guy. Logan Gilbert comes across as Walter, but he is an intensely competitive guy, and they all want to win. And there was no difference between how they felt and how I felt on what was the last day of the season. And I think that we all had that frustration that we had come so close and we thought could make a difference. But I believe that the way that we build the team is to have more young players that will stay with us for a long period of time. And I think while it's easy to say, look across the dugout and hire a $300 or $400 million free agent, with the knowledge that you're going to get a couple of good years and then you will have mortgaged your future for a player that may be in his late 30s or early 40s and not be able to perform at the same level. I want to have players that are going to be in their prime and playing for the Seattle Mariners and helping us achieve that goal of being a playoff team year after year.
Well, I think this organization has had that experience in the past, and you've learned from it. And, as an owner and as someone who's a titan in business, John, I mean, I'm sure that you believe that when you stop learning, you're dead. Like, you're always learning.
No question. And I would point. We're in the Legends room at T-Mobile Park right now, and I look up on the wall and I see a guy I had dinner with 2 nights ago, in Ken Griffey Jr. We wanted Junior to be a part of our ownership group because he brings a different perspective. I have had many talks with him, but Junior brings to us that reminder of those teams in 95, 97, 2000, 2001 that were so good and so consistent. But the core of that team, to me, is illustrative of what we're trying to do now. We're trying to have a group of guys, our equivalent of Junior, Edgar, Jay, Dan, Randy, later Ichiro. Our equivalent of that is to have a Julio, to have Cal, have JP, to have the best pitching staff in baseball, led by Castillo, Logan, Kirby, now with Wu and Miller, and to have those guys be able to deliver year in and year out, so that the kids that are in Little League are fighting over getting Cal's number as opposed to when our kids were growing up getting Junior's number. I want those young people to be associate themselves with this team in a way that they feel the excitement not this year but every year.
All right, lastly, this whole interview has been a great message to the fans. I mean, if they're listening to you, I think they better understand what this organization is about, what you're about. But if you had a message to send to fans right now as the baseball season gets going, what would it be?
We have got a great young team that is incredibly excited and is themselves excited about winning baseball here in Seattle. And we've got a team that is competitive on the field against the Red Sox on March 28th, all the way to the end of the season, and I believe we'll be in the playoffs this year.
Well, it's always great talking to you, man. I'm all fired up for the season just listening to your comments. We appreciate the time. Appreciate your candor, too, because I know it's tough to be transparent as an owner. So we appreciate it. Thanks, John.
And we appreciate our partnership with you and King TV. Thanks, Paul.
Well, it's easy to see John Stanton isn't just waxing on about his team. He truly believes they have the talent to reach the postseason. The man in charge of improving the Mariners roster is President of Baseball Operations, Jerry Dipoto. He took a ton of heat when just after the season ended, he said, quote, "It's proven throughout the divisional era that if you win 54% of your games over a 10-year stretch, odds are astronomical that you will make the World Series during that period." Well, that number, 54%, did not sit well with fans. Jerry knows that, but he hopes fans noticed what the organization did since then. Well, Jerry, appreciate you sitting down with us, first of all, and have all your seasons. You're going into your 9th season here as either GM or president. Has this been one of the more challenging off seasons for you?
You know, it's been up and down, and I would say until the calendar turned to 2024, it was the most challenging off season. And I've referenced it this way: is that a lot of the turbulence in the early off season was self-inflicted, and by the time we got to the holidays, we now had the ability, because we did the things we needed to do to resituate our roster and our payroll. We were able to then start doing the things that we really wanted to do to make our team better. And while the stark difference between the two may have created a little bit of confusion among the fan base, I hope now we're seeing a clearer picture of what the final product looks like. It's exciting because we think we have a good team.
Well, knowing you can't be completely transparent in your position, is there maybe an added importance about being more authentic to not only your players but to your fan base?
Yeah, I think we have generally over the years been about as transparent can be. We typically tell you what we're going to do and then we go do it. It's usually not the easiest way to do business with other teams, but we've always felt like that was a way to communicate the long form story to our fan base based on what we thought was the growth potential of our roster. And it's been really transparent since we started the 2019 season, when we were in effect building the roster that you see today. And along the way, we hit a couple of bumps in the road. And the one thing that becomes a little more difficult to be as transparent about is when you're making decisions based on quality of talent coming in, and when you have to balance the quality of talent with some of the economic issues, because you can't let the other 29 teams know that part of it. You can let them know who's available. You can't tell them, what your needs are in the background. So we do the best we can at balancing those and telling our fan base the story of the Mariners. And I think we'll continue to do that, hopefully in an effective way.
I mean, at some point, it's got to be limited for sure. You can't just, like I said, you can't be completely transparent. It'll affect the way you can do your job.
Yeah, it does. And when you pick up the phone on the other side and teams know you have to do something, instead of operating from do you have a fit in this type of player matchup, it makes it far more challenging when the former is true. So we try to focus on the latter. It's all about the roster, how these 26 players line up. And when we're communicating with other clubs, we try not to let them too far into the house on what's happening more broadly in the organization.
Well, you look at the organization in the big picture. An open checkbook doesn't guarantee success. The Mets are a prime example of that last year, among many other teams. But is there an added importance and maybe reliance on your scouts and your talent evaluators to get it right when it comes to players, whether it's a draft, trade, or free agency?
You know, it's always been an important thing for us and kind of our backbone. You know, we are a team, and I've said this before, we're built on the notion of draft and develop, and we trade. Those are our primary functions, and then we accent or augment our roster through free agency. And this offseason was really no different. We have an unbelievable scouting department. Scott Hunter and Frankie Thon, Brendan Damaraki, and now Dave Cameron oversee our player personnel from amateur to major league levels, and have done a great job of identifying players that you see every day. You know, this roster, whether it be trade acquisitions like Mitch Haniger, like J.P. Crawford, Ty France, Andres Munoz, etc., or draft and develop players like Julio and George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Cal Raleigh, etc. You know, we have really excelled in that area, and we continue to lean into that because we think it's the thing we do best.
Well, let's talk about that. At some point, Jerry, you talk about these stars on this team. The fans get to know them and they see their potential. But at some point, a lot of fans like to complain, why aren't you out there improving the roster? But you've got stars on this team that have to mature and live up to their potential as well.
And I guess my answer to the question is we feel like we are improving the roster. We feel like we've done that year over year, and it shows up in the performance on the field. You know, with each passing year, we get a little bit better, we get a little bit further along, we get a little bit more experienced. I think we took a nice step this year, you know, in setting up our 2024 roster, but you'll have to see the 162 games play out before you can judge whether we did enough.
You were handed a smaller budget in the offseason. You had to create some payroll flexibility by making some trades and offloading some salary. One of those trades involved Jared Kelenic. How tough was it to part ways with a young guy like that with so much potential?
It's always difficult to make trades, and you know, I won't limit it to just that trade. Any trade, you know, we get emotionally attached to the players that come through our system, especially those who've been here for a while. And that makes it complicated. But you know, at some point you do have to step back and look at the bigger picture. And that's the way we handled the beginning part of this offseason for sure. But it's largely the way we've behaved for the last 8 or 9 years, is always consider the impact on the big picture.
Do you put more pressure on yourself going into this season than maybe seasons in the past?
Not really. I think every season has its own challenges, and you know, we're going to play 162 of them. You know, and we know this because Casey Stengel once told us it was true. You know, every team's going to win 50 and lose 50. It's what you do with the other 62. And I don't know which of the games we play are part of that 62. So, you know, we go in with a fairly balanced attitude. We want to win. You know, we want to go out there. Our goal on opening day is to go win our division. And you know, like you alluded to, the biggest payroll doesn't always result in the World Series winner or the best team. As a matter of fact, it almost always doesn't. You know, baseball's a funny game that way. But you got to be on the dance floor to win. And our goal is to constantly be on the dance floor, and we feel like we've built a roster that allows for that.
Well, it's kind of fun to see as the fans look at it. You see teams like the Oakland A's in the past who do it with nothing. And Baltimore Orioles last year, their payroll was very small, and they were able to make that great run that they had. That's really just a testament to these ball clubs and these organizations that can get it done without writing that big check.
Well, you got to be creative, and the way we look at it is we are more fortunate than half the teams in the league. You know, our payroll. I think teams like Tampa, or you know, as you mentioned, teams like Tampa, Baltimore, Oakland, in their salad days would salivate to have a payroll that we do. So, you know, we're in a pretty good position. This was a year that was fairly turbulent around the league due to some of the RSN issues that existed, and you know, might be better than half the league that had the similar type of challenge that we did headed into this offseason. And in some way, that was to our benefit because we were able to match up with teams on deals based on their own needs to balance the talent on their roster with the economics of budgets. And you know, we feel like a lot of teams were in that position, and I think it has resulted in a more methodical offseason. And we showed some patience, which isn't normally a trait that we've been accused of having a lot of. And I think it paid off for us.
Well, let's talk about the pitching. As you go into spring training and you go into this new baseball season, your pitching staff comes back, the rotation with all 5 starters intact. Okay, so they're coming back. You got some really good young arms. The starting rotation led the American League in ERA last year. That's something to hang your hat on. Are you one of those guys just like you can never have enough pitching because what you have is almost an embarrassment of riches to a lot of teams in the league?
Yeah, I would say that if there are 30 people in the league that do the job that I do or something like the job that I do, all of them are that type of person. You never have enough pitching. And right now I feel we're in a wonderful spot, and on paper our rotation is good to elite. It's, we think, one of the best rotations in baseball, if not the best. Our bullpen with the back end of Andres Munoz, with Matt Brash, with Gabe Spire, and now Gregory Santos, who we picked up a few days ago, is we think elite. One of the best back of the bullpens in the league, and we play in a ballpark that really favors pitchers, and to lean into that gives you a chance to win the game every night. And I think we have a sneaky good offense, but what we do best is we pitch. And from the starting five through what we think is a very effective bullpen, very excited to see this group.
As you go into this season, you made some trades. Players left, players are coming in. Is there one or two guys that you're excited to see?
A focal point for us going into this offseason was Mitch Garver. He was, for us, the #1 free agent on the market. He fit us so well. The things that he does, the way he plays, the way he does it, and the fact that we think if we take, the burden of going out and catching every day, which for us we know is Cal Raleigh, and focus more on designated hitter for Mitch, that it gives us the ability to keep him on the field and healthy. Because when he's on the field and healthy, he's one of the most impactful hitters in the league, and has been for a number of years now. You just don't notice it because he doesn't play as regularly as, say, the everyday shortstop or right fielder. But he can really swing the bat. So excited to see what Mitch can do. Jorge Polanco, who we picked up from Minnesota, is a seasoned switch hitter. He's going to be 30 years old this year. He's had an all-star season. He's had a 30-homer season. He's been one of the best offensive players at his position for about 5 years now. And we feel like he is a platoon-neutral addition that hopefully solves a problem that we have had a very difficult time trying to solve through the years. So looking forward to watching Jorge play and watching our own young players take that next step forward. And that includes some that have already turned into stars, like Julio and George and Cal. But we think there's so much more in there. And I think the player who is sneaky awesome that nobody gives enough credit to outside of our market is Logan Gilbert. And and watching Logan show up and do the things that he does start after start, and he just gets better every year. I'm really looking forward to that group of players becoming the core and the leaders in our clubhouse is a big thing.
Yeah, well, fans have got to know him and a lot of your other young stars on this team. Before I take you off the field for a couple other questions, do you have a message for these Mariners fans that are looking forward to the season and looking to see just how things played out?
Yeah, I know it was an uncomfortable offseason, and it was turbulent, especially early. And hopefully now that the picture is a little bit clearer, everybody can get excited about what we think is a good team. And I think the projection systems tend to agree that it's a good team. I know our players are excited about the way the team came together. And along the way, there was a couple of months of real discomfort as we got to this point. But I think the fact that we took on that discomfort in the early going allowed us to do a lot of what we've been able to do over the last 6 or 7 weeks. And it's been a meaningful change that has had a positive result. And I think again, look forward to seeing how this team gels on the field, because I think just looking at the roster, it's as deep a group as we've ever had here.
Well, isn't that the key, though, even in life, Jerry, that not even so much in baseball, but everybody makes mistakes, and you can't just sit there and dwell on them. You have to embrace this and move on and move forward.
Yeah, I know. I've done nothing in baseball but learn lessons, and this is what I've done my entire work life. I was a player. I was a front office person, a scout, and obviously doing these jobs. You fail a lot in this business, and it starts with the players on the field. A great hitter makes an out 7 out of 10 times. There are very few pitchers that have ever achieved perfection, even in a single day. So, I've spent a lifetime learning how to manage through, the bumps in the road. And the same thing, not every transaction is going to work the way you think. Not every trade is going to have the desired result. Not every player is going to play as well as his ability suggests he should. But you just adapt along the way, because the baseball season gives you time to do it.
All right, 2 last questions for you. You're a season ticket holder for the Kraken. Where does the hockey love come from?
Grew up a hockey fan. I lived in the Northeast, grew up in New Jersey. Was a Rangers fan as a kid. And then the Devils came along, and that was the first time I got to drive myself to go to games. And I love the game. It's fast. It's the players are unbelievably skilled. And when the Kraken came back here, or came to be 3 years ago, my wife and I very quickly signed up, and we go to every game that we can, and we've got God knows how much Kraken swag in the closet. Probably exceeds my Mariners.
I was going to ask you,
Yeah,
more than Mariners?
Yeah.
Well, that's crazy. All right, so, and then when you're not at the ballpark and you're not at the hockey rink, you like to cook. So where did the fascination and this thrill to cook come from?
I guess on some level I've always been interested in it, but it probably dates back maybe 10 or 12 years ago. Took it on as more of a stress relief. Hey, I'd like to do something to take my mind off of the job, because the jobs we do, like so many people in the work world, and I can't tell you what it's like necessarily outside of baseball, but you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about players' health, availability, what's happening in contract negotiations, roster building, and it can tend to steamroll when you're managing 175 people and 225 players and all the systems and programs that come under our watch. And if you don't find some way to unplug, it can get overwhelming. So I started experimenting, and God bless the Food Network. I was able to tap into something that was not baseball related, and it allowed me an escape. And I liked it because, just like as a player, you could see yourself getting better at it, and you see, the response from the crowd. And for me, my crowd was my wife and kids, but the family liked what was happening. And maybe like our off season, they didn't like it so much at the start, but they grew to appreciate the quality.
Well said. It's a little therapeutic too for you, huh?
It truly is, and I go home and I really enjoy it. It's something my wife and I can do together. And on Sundays, it's something I like to do with all the family. Do something where they all pitch in, and it's become kind of a thing, and I love it.
All right, well, here's to you developing a recipe for success for the Mariners season 2. So thanks a lot for joining us. We appreciate it.
You got it.